CFRO 100.5 FM is member-owned. When you take out a membership in Co-op Radio, you get a share in the station. This makes you a part owner.
Co-op Radio is member-driven. When you become a member, you can get involved in programming and help run the station. Co-op Radio is community radio. Visit coopradio.org to find out how you can become a member.
Vancouver Cooperative Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, all different, all the time.
So quiet but night after night. Sana kahit na ganito, matanggap ninyo ako. I'm just like you. I'm just like you. Malaw na ako'y pangalan din nila. Wala namang pinakaiba. I'm just like you. Maybe this is how it goes. When I talk, they end up with a bloody nose. Sana kahit na ganito, matanggap ninyo ako. I'm just like you. I'm just like you.
You're listening to Kahit Saan Pa Man on Jeepney Cafe here on 100.5 CFRO, Vancouver's Co-op Radio. I am your host, Louise. So we have a couple of announcements here. For those who have been with us from the beginning of the show, of Kahit Saan Pa Man, you know that we started off as a radio drama, and it's been a really, really fun time doing that entire venture. But unfortunately, it has to come to an abrupt end. It was a really difficult venture, but we were more than happy to rise up to the challenge. But unfortunately, right at the end of it, it was just really difficult to upkeep, as there are a lot of complications that go on behind the scenes. So what we will be transitioning to a new type of show. We'll be keeping the title of this show so that you guys aren't confused by all of a sudden every third Saturday of the month it's something completely different. But we will still be exploring the topics that we've explored in the radio drama that are related to the first generation, second generation, and so on and so forth of Filipino Canadians. we're aiming to make this show into a discussion and exploration on those topics. And today we're actually gonna be looking into the discussion of language. We have a special guest here today, but at this point, to be honest, she's more like a co-host, considering how often she's been here with us, and she will be with us again in future episodes. Would you like to say hello?
Hi there, guys. This is Mars or Megan, depending on which show you tune into. I often come on the radio. We have a joke with Kuya John, one of the other radio hosts, that Mars and Lou are our music group come on every once a year, but now we're on pretty regularly as Megan and Louise, or Louise Janine, depending on the day.
Yeah, depending on the day. I have several different names, depending on what I'm doing that day.
Yeah, if you don't remember me, I played Grace in the first season, and now
the
I'm
first
on
season, the only
the
season.
first and only season, and now I'm on as a part-time co-host.
Yeah, I guess we can give you that title now, can't we?
You just did.
But just before we get started, I just wanted to check in with everybody, all of our listeners, and hopefully it's been a good weekend so far. I definitely have people who are around me who've been facing trying and stressful times, whether or not it's because school started back up again recently or because of ongoing stress from life and work. We just want to make sure that to remind everybody that with everything going on and everything that we see in the news, it's really easy to enter a not really positive frame of mind, but it's okay to care. It's natural to get affected, and it can get a little bit overwhelming. So I just want to remind everybody out there that it's okay to sit down and take a bit of time for yourself, whether or not it's to clear your head, to gain some quiet, to relax before going on and living the rest of your busy life. But back to the show. We are going to be keeping the title of the show because I believe that it's very appropriate. For those who don't speak Tagalog, kahit saan pa man has a couple of different meanings to it, loosely translated because there are no subjects in that sentence. It could either be wherever you are or wherever it may be. And because we will be discussing issues surrounding people who live here, Filipino people who live here in Canada, we want to be able to make that connection. And we're going to be talking about language today in the context of us who live here overseas. Language, regardless of what you speak, make up a big part of who you are culturally and just your identity in general. It's the main way we communicate our ideas, our feelings to one another, and it informs how we make connections in our brains and how we put together thoughts. And for people who are born here in immigrant families or even immigrants themselves who straddle more than one language, there are times when it can become a point of struggle. So you heard of the song at the top of the hour. It's called I'm Just Like You by Adela Mae Marshall. She is a Filipino-British model, I believe, working in the Philippines, and the song talks about it's a bilingual song having both English and Tagalog in there, talking about how regardless of what your background may be, and we know that Filipino people they come from a very culturally diverse backgrounds just because of our history. We're all just kind of same people. We also know that there are many different types of languages and dialects that are spoken in different parts of the Philippines, depending on where you're coming from. So I think a lot of there's something like main languages, maybe around 12 dialects that are the main ones, and then a whole bunch of other smaller other like variations of those languages, branching off into different dialects in each part of the Philippines. But at the same time, the main language is spoken, and the main language that is acknowledged as the official language of the Philippines, which is Tagalog, it has come to an evolution of sorts from our history. There is a lot of mixture of the Spanish and English languages in there, and it has come to the point now in the Philippines where the official language has come into two things, or there are two official languages there now. It's Tagalog and English, just by the amount of usage. English has actually become such a culturally important language in the country. So a lot of institutions, educational institutions, end up teaching English. One of the biggest methods of the economic sort of sort of landscape there right now is educational tourism in the Philippines, as it has become a place in Asia to learn English. And it's actually an interesting thing that the government itself has their own programs directly targeted towards other Asian countries around or surrounding the Philippines. They have this thing called, and I'm just pulling this up from the tourism website of the Philippine government, something called the Philippine ESL Tour Program, where depending on what your level English is, you are able to go to different parts of the Philippines and different institutions, specifically for the purpose of learning English. It's also historically been a common thing to start teaching English to in these institutions for the Filipinos themselves, where to an extent that the Department of Education in 2012 had to introduce a program across the Philippines called the Mother Tongue-Based Multilingual Education, MTB-MLE, for those who are more familiar with those terms, where schools would have to teach from kindergarten into grade 3 in the mother tongue of the region that you're in. So not just Tagalog, but also Ilocano, Cebuano, etc. I believe there's something like 12 languages that are sought out.
Do you want me to help you find it?
Yeah.
In all the papers?
Actually, it's here. It's right here. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So the official languages that are meant to be taught are Tagalog, Kapampangan, Pangasinis, Iloco, Bicol, Cebuano, Hiligaynon. What I really apologize if I can't pronounce these names properly. I only really speak Tagalog. Tausug, Magindanaoan, Maranao, and Chabacano.
I think it's Pangasinense.
Okay. Yes, Megan's family here actually comes from Pangasinan. Thank you for the correction. But it's come to the point now where, because English has been so heavily promoted in the institutions in the Philippines, we have, and even in the second year that sort of department order has been implemented, we're seeing things like, there was a GMA article actually from 2013 that reported on 3 students being asked to leave a school.
I couldn't believe it when I heard it.
Yeah, for the sole purpose that they were speaking Ilocano. If we revisit again what the Department of Education's order was, it was from kindergarten to grade 3 within that program. So technically speaking, this school wasn't doing anything against that order. They had expelled 3 grade 8 students for speaking Ilocano in their school. And I'm quoting this from the article in itself. The SCA, which is the school, speaking the vernacular at the campus is listed under miscellaneous misconduct for reprimand. Which basically states that English only is the priority of that institution.
When you first told me about this, I honestly thought you were talking about like college or university students, and then you told me they were grade 8, and I was like, I know we're just reporting what the article was, but I just can't believe it.
I mean, it's a very... You're talking about students that are their children at this point, and they're still within an institution that's supposed to help them carry themselves through the rest of their lives. And one of the difficult things is, of course, a lot of private schools there in the Philippines are very expensive. So when you're being thrown out of your school that your parents probably worked really hard to get you into, it's a shock. It's really difficult to deal with that. You know, but it's interesting because here for us in Canada, the Filipino Canadians, we're very used to the concept of, we have to speak English. Not everybody learns their mother tongue, and that's okay because that's not necessarily the society that we live in here. And but for them, they still have to be dealing with people that speak very many different languages and have to use it in very different capacities. And it's interesting. I mean, as a Canadian, even we kind of we're kind of taught early on that we should be learning how to speak French and English, as that is a very, very prominent thing within the educational culture here, right? We have the dual kind of identity within our culture that's a majorly accepted thing, but it's not always as prominent. But at the same time, we can't really ignore the fact that there is a large French speaking population here on the other side of we're in Vancouver, so of course it's not as prominent here, but
No,
when
but
you go
East
over,
Coast for sure. Like in Quebec, pretty much, for those of you who don't live in Canada, pretty much Quebec is almost an all French-speaking province of Canada, and it got one of the biggest populations, if not the biggest population of residents in that province in comparison to other residents and in other provinces. I mean, and the only place I know for sure that you can speak English is like the center of Montreal, and then parts of Quebec City. But mostly, if you don't speak French, especially even if you're trying to work there or go to school there, it's very difficult.
well, I believe there is a part of Montreal. I think probably the central part that you're talking about,
like the little island in the middle of Montreal.
Yeah,
that's where you can speak bilingual, like English, no problem all the time. But as soon as you leave the little island, it's like, because most of the residents of Quebec are there for generations and generations, and they only speak French.
I mean, so to an extent, I feel like people who live here in Canada, whether or not you're Filipino or not, they'd be able to kind of understand the importance of learning and functioning within a society that requires you to kind of understand multiple languages, but still functions very much in one. Megan, you've gone back to the Philippines recently, right? Last year, and how much English did you, or how much Tagalog did you actually have to speak there, as opposed to being able to communicate with people in English?
It was varied, mostly because, of course, I was with relatives literally the whole time, so a lot of times I didn't have to speak. But even then, it was. All I can think is that it was difficult, because English is one of the and I mean the only language I really do speak, and I only have, I would say, 50% understanding of Tagalog, and like maybe 5 to 10% of the spoken Tagalog. When it's even when you showed me an article earlier, I was like, oh, it's all in Tagalog. I need to read it out loud to be able to understand any of it. But when I was there, mostly English, really, because even here I have lots of people who are not of all different backgrounds who don't speak a lot of English, and then I have to, and where I work, I do also teach those who are ESL. So long as what I found is, so long as you keep the conversation fairly simple, and it is fairly simple. It's usually just asking where something is, or asking someone how they are, whatever. So long as it's basic English, you can get by. But a lot of times I was very surprised at the depth of like, I already knew those, especially in our generation, the Philippines now are very fluent in English, but just the amount of English that I used there I found really amazing, because I hardly ever had to be embarrassed about the fact that I didn't speak any Tagalog or any other dialect, because where I went, which was Manila, and then Pangasinan, and then Baguio, and then Iloilo, it really was English dominated, even in the, not necessarily in Pakistan, because I was in a very small municipality, but anywhere that I went that was even vaguely, touristy, that it was like pure English almost. And for example, when I was in Iloilo, which is like south, completely opposite of where I was when I was in Pangasinan, it was like south of Manila, it was more common for you to speak English than it was for you to speak Tagalog. Like, it was weird. It was weird for anybody to, if they didn't know the local dialect, that it was weird for them to even default to Tagalog. They would default to English automatically. And so that was just an interesting experience as well.
Well, we kind of see that as a result of having English within the institutions and kind of growing up with that language as well, right? If just reading off again this article by about those 3 students being asked to leave, they actually give a little bit of background into how English kind of came to be. Kind of such a prominent force within those institutions. They say specifically that in 2003, former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo issued an executive order number 210 establishing the policy to strengthen English as a second language in the educational system. So it is there. Under which English was the medium of instruction for English, math, and science from at least grade 3. So you're talking about the 3 main subjects that people are meant to learn in school, and having that just surround you within that setting. So it's not really that surprising that where you were going, you said Iloilo, right? Yeah, that it would be very widespread. I mean, obviously within Manila, because it is the capital where there's a whole bunch of people working in there internationally, that it would be a language that's very widely spoken there as well. And we are seeing it as well with universities. I don't know just to what capacity, but sometimes in my spare time I like watching random news clips and articles. So I was actually watching this one kind of news coverage stating where in certain universities in the Philippines now are allowing for international students to be able to get their entire degrees in English.
Wow.
Yeah, so one of the strongest kind of foreign relations that we have in the Philippines is with South Korea, where they have a lot of South Korean students going into the Philippines and
to learn English.
Yeah, to learn English, whether or not it's only partially some of their degree and then they go back to Korea to earn the rest of their degree, or if they get their entire degree within the Philippines because of that, because of learning English and such.
Yeah, when I was on my trip, I met somebody. He was like, during my trip, I was in South Korea for about 2 weeks, and then on the plane ride back to the Philippines, I did meet someone who was literally like, oh yeah, I went there and I learned English and then I stayed because I got a girlfriend. So basically, like, that's like, yeah, they go there to, like, everybody was there. Whoever was a student, he told me that he overheard them all talking. They're all going to speak there to learn how to speak English, and I was like, wow. I mean, I knew about it, but it's
just
different.
seeing it with your own eyes, right?
Yeah.
We're actually going to take a little bit of a music break right now, and just to kind of give a context to this song, it's not in Tagalog. It's actually by a French Canadian collective of musicians named Mesayer. I'm sorry if I butchered that. So the purpose of language, as we find within the most basic sense, is to carry on traditions and carry on these kind of like oral stories. And this song is actually a song that takes place with and starts telling a story within three different, or I think it might be 4 different generations within a family. So this song is kind of to present one of the like still existing purposes of maintaining your mother tongue. So.
Ton arrière-arrière-grand-père, il a défriché la terre. Ton arrière-grand-père, il a labouré la terre. Et puis ton grand-père a rentabilisé la terre. Et puis ton père, il l'a vendu pour devenir fonctionnaire. Et puis toi, mon petit gars, tu sais plus ce que tu vas faire dans ton petit 3,5, ben trop cher, fret en hiver. Il te vient des envies de devenir propriétaire et tu rêves la nuit d'avoir ton petit lopin de terre. Ton arrière-arrière-grand-mère, elle a eu 14 enfants. Ton arrière-grand-mère en a eu quasiment autant. Et pis ta grand-mère en a eu 3, c'était suffisant. Pis ta mère en voulait pas, toi t'étais un accident. Et pis toi, ma petite fille, tu changes de partenaire tout le temps. Quand tu fais des conneries, tu t'en sauves en avortant. Mais y a des matins, tu te réveilles en pleurant quand tu rêves la nuit d'une grande table entourée d'enfants. Ton arrière-arrière-grand-père a vécu la grosse misère. Ton arrière-grand-père, il ramassait les personne noire. Et puis ton grand-père miracle est devenu millionnaire. Ton père en a hérité, il l'a tout mis dans ses REER. Et puis toi, petite jeunesse, tu dois ton cul au ministère. Pas moyen d'avoir un prêt dans une institution bancaire pour calmer tes envies de hold-up et la caissière. Tu lis des livres qui parlent de simplicité volontaire. Tes arrière-arrière-grands-parents, ils savaient comment fêter. Tes arrière-grands-parents, ça swingait fort dans les veillées. Puis tes grands-parents ont connu l'époque yéyé. Tes parents, c'était les discos, c'est là qu'ils se sont rencontrés. Et puis toi, mon ami, qu'est-ce que tu fais de ta soirée? Éteins donc ta TV, faut pas rester encabané. Heureusement que dans vie, certaines choses refusent de changer. Enfile tes plus beaux habits, car nous allons ce soir danser.
You're listening to Kahit Saan Pa Man on Jeepney Cafe here on 100.5 CFRO Vancouver's Co-op Radio. I always stumble on that 100. Anyway, that was the group Mes Aïeux, and the song is called Dégénération. I really hope I said that correctly. And I apologize for our French-speaking listeners out there who might be cringing a little bit. But so that song was actually, as I stated before, covering multiple generations within a family. And just the progression of how they started off as farmers and kind of landowners, and then setting up businesses, and just where those kind of generations that end up funneling into in that. I mean, the kind of ending was a little the ending of that song, at least the singing part, was a little bit more, oh, so you became a party person. But it kind of is a commentary on where our society, at least the French Canadian society, has come from, where they were settlers here first, and then going into the more modern eras. So they actually mention an époque yéyé, which is, I believe, referencing probably the 70s which is a little bit more free. So we played that song as an example of where the oral tradition within certain cultures still plays a very important part in passing off stories and traditions, and that's really one of the more important things that we have language being maintained for. With a lot of Filipino families, we find that those who do choose to learn English do so, one, because it is within the society, but also because of economic mobility. There are a lot of Filipinos who don't necessarily have the economic means to support everybody in their family. And, we have families that tend to be really big, or we have to support people who are within our extended family, because that's just the way that we were brought up in our culture. And what tends to happen is that these people who learn English and then they end up moving to other countries. We actually have a community called, for those who aren't familiar with Filipino terminology, we call them OFWs, which is short for overseas foreign workers. So for a lot of Filipinos, they go over to Canada or Singapore or Hong Kong or the US, England, just some of those places, and a lot of these places look for English speakers. And as a result, there are a lot of Filipinos who are born outside the Philippines, as it is when it comes to globalized economy. And there are a lot of other cultures that experience the same thing as well, where we have become there has become a larger amount within our diaspora. And to actually give a little bit of context, the CIA World Factbook has stated that there is an estimated large we have these things called remittances, where we send money back to the Philippines, and they measured just how much remittances are sent on a regular basis, and money being sent home to the Philippines. There are about 10 million overseas Filipino workers and migrants, and that feeds into the Philippine economy. And also, according to and to also kind of give an idea of just how many Filipinos are, living outside of the Philippines, most likely for the economic kind of reasons. According to Pew Research Center, which is based in, I believe, Maryland in the USA, on top of an increasing Filipino population in the US, at least 70% of the Filipinos who are born outside of the States are proficient within English. So they came there with the purpose of working within an English environment. And that's to say we have like millions and millions of Filipino people living in the States already. And, for the most part, they are living in metropolitan areas of the United States, the top three cities being Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York. And I mean, Megan, your family as well they've moved from the Philippines in order to kind of, in a lack of a better term, live a better life overseas, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When I was, I think, 1 year old, we came from Dubai. My parents were working there at the time, and we were in the Philippines for, I have to go by what they say because I don't really know myself, until I was about 2, and then when I was about 2, we came here, and this is where I've been since, essentially.
Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with my family as well. We moved actually around a lot from different places. Well, we moved to Canada first, and then we moved around to different places in the world, and usually for English-speaking places, for the sole purpose of going upward within our economic status, I would say, just because in the Philippines, because there's, I believe, I wrote a piece about this a while ago. When I was doing the research, there was something like 100 million Filipino people living in the Philippines, and about 30% of them living underneath the poverty line, if not more, because the economy within the Philippines itself is not large enough to sustain the entire population. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of people who actually move out of that country just for the purpose of finding a job. And it's kind of a common knowledge within a lot of Filipino people that one of the biggest exports we have within the Philippines is actually our foreign workers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how that ties into language is, as a result, we do have a lot of people that are being born outside of the Philippines, and they're growing up within societies that don't necessarily use the Filipino language to communicate. So as a result, in order to survive in these societies, they have to learn whatever language is in front of them. So we have a lot of Filipino people who are first generation, second generation. Sorry, I would say second generation, third generation, who grow up and their first language is English. First generations, there's I myself, I'm a first generation Filipino Canadian, and I grew up with the Filipino language, but ended up, because of living in English speaking areas for so long, having lost a lot of that. And I'm finding with a lot of, at least the people around me, a lot of the people that I've met and those who are my friends, who a lot of them face the sort of same situation where language gets lost on them.
I think that with the whole topic about language, I think the whole reason why we're talking about it is because the whole kahit saan pa man ideology about identity. And a lot of times the problem of English being our first language, or at least my first language, as someone who really almost didn't, my very first words, of course, were in Tagalog, but after that, like after my first year, whatever, I only spoke English. And so now there's this big question about like what, like we cover this topic a lot, especially in Catherine's journey in the drama, about what makes you Filipino. And if not the language, if not the history, what else?
And part of it too is because what tends to happen with people who live overseas is that the traditions and the culture, it gets transported through the vessel of the parents, and with people not being able to grow up immediately within that surrounding where they are able to take in the culture themselves. So it's kind of second-hand gift.
Or it's by media, by the little bit of media that we get, for example, from Philippines, to hear the little bit of media on TV that we might see at parents, friends, places, and like whatnot. And that is our impression. That is the footprint of what Filipino culture is. But then it leaves the question of, if I don't connect to that, if this superficial thing is the only thing I've gotten my whole life, what does make me Filipino? And
because we do have to address the fact that a lot of those things, what you're saying is the fact that it is media, so it is going to be from a one-sided perspective, and it doesn't encapsulate the entire culture.
Yeah, it's just one reflection about what it, and it's a very, I call it superficial because it's for show, it's for entertainment. It's not an everyday thing. We don't see the daily struggles. We don't see that 30% below the poverty line. We don't see all that. We just hear the stories about it, and we just see the glamorized parts of it. So it's a very hard thing to connect to, I find. And I think the whole reason we're talking about language is that it's one of the biggest connectors there is, because it's how we communicate with each other.
Exactly. And it's usually within the communication with those around you immediately. And when you have your parents who speak a specific language and they're trying to translate to you like something else, and you yourself are not able to understand that first language, so you're not only getting secondhand information, but you're also getting it not necessarily watered down, but depending on the level of the understanding that you might need it to be, it could be watered down. It might not be the best.
I just think it lays down to miscommunication.
Yeah,
because to be fair, like a lot of times I've noticed, I do notice, some of my friends tell me this too, is just like they say that, oh, your accent comes out when you speak to your parents. I'm like, I don't actually have an accent, but I end up defaulting to that. And I thought long and hard about it, and it's because that there have been so many conversations or one-sided conversations about how, they end up thinking that I think I'm better than them because I can only speak English and whatnot. So I realized it was such a psychological thing, that it comes out because I want them to, talk to me on their level as much as possible, as much as the fact that I can't speak Tagalog fluently at all. And so I just realized, after this is the first time I'm saying it out loud, but it's just a lot of years of realizing that it's a lot of the classism you talked about before. It's a lot about fitting yourself in to somewhere that you're not quite sure. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, but
Oh no, it makes sense. It's in a sense where at least what we've seen, or what I've experienced, or what I've seen in the Philippines at least, is that is being able to speak English means that you're coming from a higher class of society because you're able to get that education, or you're surrounding yourself with the people who are able to get that education. And so be speaking Filipino, that's kind of like our common baseline languages, but you have this additional, you have English, which is kind of like, it's supposed to signify that you are at a higher level to an extent than a bunch of other. Even it's not true.
It's weird.
but-
It's weird. The reason why I'm just saying it's because when I first visited the Philippines, I've only been to the Philippines twice. Besides, I don't count when I was like 2 years old, whatever. So when I was 12 and when I was 24. So literally like half a lifetime ago. And when I was there, when I was 12, I almost couldn't speak that whole trip because my parents and everyone around me was so afraid that we get charged more. And it was at a time where just in the span of 12 years since those two trips, how English is viewed now and how much people actually use it. Because when I first was there, I couldn't speak, like I wasn't allowed to speak it at all. And by the time I got there the second time, it was the fact that like, why aren't you just speaking English? Why aren't you? Like, you should just speak English.
Because it has come to that point, I guess with the how would you say, the spread of media being much more commonplace. The reach of media, and just in general in the Philippines, the economy just becoming a bigger thing. People have more access to things now, and so English has become much more accessible, and so that has signified that sort of changed. We're going to take another music break again here. And what I'm going to introduce is a song by a Filipino group named Smoky Mountain. And they were a group that were really popular, I believe, in the 80s and the 90s. But even back then, we're seeing a whole bunch of emigration away from the Philippines because of the economic need of Filipinos. And so this is a little bit of a commentary / criticism towards that sort of viewpoint. And the song is called Not All the World is America.
Many of them lying through the tongues, pretending they are what they certainly aren't, hustling for the valuable past to America. America. Ooh, America. America. Why they wanna go, I don't understand. Though they really ought to know there are other lands. Better if they stay in their motherland than to live as a second-class man in America.
Linguistics for my mother. Ma, I haven't spoken Tamil in 3 years. Call it forgetting or just prenatal Americanization. Some God must have known I was a child of loose change, of ambiguity, of everything more confused than it should be, of conjoined twins snipped off the cord together, of the love of a language. Mother, maybe I lose the syllables of my name next, ancient and observing, still like the way rice farmers wade into their crop after the monsoon swallowed them whole. This is a lesson on everything sacred. We promise to keep culture like dollars and gum wrappers, stashed in inside-out pockets, tumbled and dried in the wash, bleached and chlorinated by city swimming pools, floating pieces of ourselves blanched in cauliflower and contamination. This is how letters forget themselves. This is how a daughter loses the weight of her tongue in her mouth, replaces it with a borrowed accent, a softer L, a rumbling A, a smeared R, toothpick consonants, dissonance. Ma, we were Indian until we weren't. Meanwhile, I pretend I am cultured. I read Dickinson, structure culture around the line breaks of my own ignorance. Outside, the sun melts into itself, and I am thinking of all the ways to say that I am lost. The crumpled syllables cramping in my mouth. This is not poetry anymore. This is what happens when a daughter forgets where her lungs are, what they were made of. Ma, I'm losing parts of myself every day, leaving bits of human when I walk, buttons, sweater strings, rosin dust, crushed bottles of water, worlds and worlds and words, latex gloves and frozen over car lots downtown, mustard seed heat thawing immigrant dreams, silence. I want to question whether these are the things that make up the constellations of my genetics, the silence of my voice. But even I know nothing is silent about life. I've lost more than I've ever lost in 16 years. I've started shedding ethnicity like hair. Mother, I fear I'll go bald.
You're listening to Kahit Saan Pa Man on Jeepney Cafe here on a 100.5 CFRO Vancouver's Co-op Radio. So the song was Not All the World is America by Smoky Mountain. And right after we played a wonderful poem by a poet named Maya Ishwaran. She had performed that poem at the White House during the Obama administration. And they were, I believe, it was giving awards to young poets of America at the time. So that was her poem about her losing her capability of speaking Tamil. And I believe that a lot of people here are able to relate to that. When you come to this country as a first generation, and even when you're born into an immigrant family, what tends to happen is you lose the capability slowly yet surely of being able to speak the language. And part of that is assimilating into a different culture, but part of that also sometimes, and this is personally speaking, feels like you're losing a little bit of yourself in that. And I feel like she was able to encapsulate all that in her beautiful piece right there. And I think, it really applies just across the board that language is such an important thing just for communication reasons. And even if you have a country much like the Philippines where English is going to be adopted, there are always going to be people that don't speak that language who might feel like they're being left behind. And being able to maintain and preserve the language is such an important thing within our society. It's really interesting, actually, and I believe I've talked about this with you, Megan. For me, I am studying French as one of my subjects for my university, and it's one of the things that you learn learning French is that after they came over to Canada and had their language changed, they actually had an academy to maintain the language. And I believe Spain has it too. They have an academy for maintaining the Spanish language, making sure that all the influences don't influence and change the meaning all too much. We do have something similar to that now within the Philippines. I believe it is. Oh my gosh, I totally forgot what the what the group is called. But yeah, they have a government group that handles all of that, and I think it's really important. Because otherwise we lose a lot of our history, a lot of our culture. It's already I don't know about you, Megan, but when trying to research anything historical, the Philippines, finding it really difficult because of lack of written record.
Yeah, all of our most of our things I find are oral, so they're passed down from generations. But that also leaves a lot of open to interpretation, just because even through translation, things can get heavily interpreted wrong. So because of, like, for example, the loss of our written word, our was it called baybayin? I can't remember.
I
now.
believe so, baybayin.
Yes, but like even when I first discovered that. Like I had no idea that existed, but a few years ago, I maybe early university, I found out that was, a thing, and I couldn't believe that, there's this. It at that moment is when it hit me how much was not here anymore because of the fact that we don't have our written history. We don't have that here.
And I mean, when you look back, and at least with the history books, a lot of what we see is it dates back quite far, but it dates back to the Spanish colonization. Beyond that, it's kind of a little bit more difficult to find anything regarding our history. And I think that really. It's really difficult really now to say that Filipinos are like a certain type of ethnic kind of group, because there are so many different contributions that we've had from other cultures as well, and that's something that we can't deny. And that within the Asian continent, we've had a lot of different people visit the country, or even live in the country, and they've contributed so much within our own culture as well. And it's really like it's an example of what a cultural mosaic is as well. As we like to call Canada a cultural mosaic as well, but the Philippines is one of the places where historically it has been such a cultural mosaic. But at the same time, there's still to some extent, then it becomes really difficult to identify, well, what is Filipino, besides what we have within our language. And so I think that's a really important thing. So there was this really interesting interview by a French-Canadian singer named Kelli Tungay, who I really admire, and she does most of her music in French. And she was asked in an interview whether or why she chooses French to sing. And she said it was a beautiful language. And then the idea of the accessibility came up. And we're running out of time here, but just in general, the idea, the accessibility and having to sing in English, it kind of makes it still a case where people are left out, because there are going to be people who don't necessarily connect the most with the English language. Do you agree?
For sure.
Yeah. So we will be, we're coming up to the end of the show here, so we will be continuing the discussions like these for the next few episodes, and we hope that you guys join in and listening to us, and we'll be doing a lot of updates to the format of this show so that we can make it better for everybody.
If you want to get in touch with us regarding any topics you'd like to hear, if you want to get involved in one of our discussions, you can contact us at contact@kahitsaanpaan.ca. Sorry.
Yeah.
Contact at KAHITSAAPAMAN.ca.
Yeah, or you could follow us on social media or check out our website, which is kahitsaanpaan.ca, where we right now have the archive of the radio drama, but we will be updating with to include the content from our new format. And also make sure to check out our other programming here at Co-op Radio as well from our collective and Jeepney Cafe. But before we go, we're gonna be finishing off with a song called Place de la République by Kelli Tungay. But before that, a word from Co-op Radio.
100.5
Sorry, I cut you.
means non-commercial,
But if you call now,
listener-powered, community radio. 100.5 means music, public affairs,
I have a dream.
and arts programming
Right up in here, we'll make a happy little cloud.
you won't find anywhere else on the radio dial. 100.5 is not owned by a huge corporation. We are owned and operated by people like you, by your community.
serve the people.
100.5 is CFRO Vancouver Cooperative Radio. Find our complete program schedule at www.coopradio.org.
On s'est connu le temps de plaire aux exigences qu'on s'est créées, mais on s'y fait. Tu n'es qu'à quelques kilomètres et nos cœurs sont restés dans cette mer. J'ai couru en longeant la Seine, en espérant te retrouver l'âme sereine. J'ai couru sans savoir comment, ni pourquoi on s'en bat. On ne s'est connu qu'un moment. Et je sais plus si tu en vaut la peine. C'est plutôt dur d'en être certaine. Et quand tu seras un pur seul, ce soir ne m'oublie pas. Je t'attendrai au moins le temps de dire que j'ai voulu prendre le plus grand risque. Un soir qui m'a rendu bien triste. Un soir place de la République. Et comme tu vois, c'est bien la fin. Je dois traverser l'océan demain matin. De tes bras, je m'arracherai tout doucement. Et c'est la réalité qui m'attend. Je sais ton cœur est à